Well, welcome back for another episode, folks. We got our first big snowfall of the year here in Sioux Falls this last Friday, and the kids are loving it. It's just great. The roads are tough. I know out west they've already gotten a bunch of snow up in the hills at least once, but it's really kind of a delightful thing as we're moving towards Christmas. We're going to have a white Christmas. Okay, we've got a great episode lined up today. I'm really excited. I think, folks, that if you remember episode 52 with Dr. Christopher Thompson, we talked about green Thomism. And if you like that episode, I think you're going to like this one a lot because we're going to talk about just like intentional living. I think we can apply this principle of integral ecology to the places in which we live. Really excited to welcome to the podcast and radio show today, Chuck Marohn. Chuck is the founder and president of Strong Towns. He's a professional engineer and a land use planner with decades of experience, holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and a master of urban and regional planning, both from the University of Minnesota. He's the author of Strong Towns, a bottom-up revolution to rebuild American prosperity. We're going to talk a little bit about that book today. He hosts the Strong Towns podcast and is a primary writer for Strong Towns web content. He's presented Strong Towns concepts in hundreds of cities and towns across North America. Planetizen named him one of the 10 most influential urbanists of all time. I love the book. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Thanks for reading the book and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was a great read, and I really encourage people to go pick it up. And you've got some other books if we want to talk about. I know you've got one out on transportation more recently that I asked my library to buy a copy. Haven't heard back from them yet, but if they don't, I'm definitely going to pick it up elsewhere. But let's just start. Let's take it from the top. Like, what is Strong Towns? Can you give us a snapshot of some of the core principles that motivates what Strong Towns is?
Yeah, at Strong Towns, we recognize that cities are not the lowest level of the government food chain. A city is our highest level of civic coordination. It's the way we work together in a place to build a community. And as such, we need our cities to be strong. We need them to be adaptable. We need them to be fiscally responsible. We need them to reflect the idea that we're not here for a week or a year or even a lifetime. Undertaking building a community is a multi-generational thing. We have to respect the people that came before us and the sacrifices they made. We have to take care of things today and make sure that we're making a better place for everybody to live. And we also have to be cognizant of the future. And so a strong town and a strong towns approach leans into the kind of received wisdom of cities of the past to make sure that the way that we're building is strong, resilient, and adaptable.
So, and if I understand it right, Strong Towns is not just like an organization. It's not just a nonprofit that promotes these ideas, but it's actually in a certain sense a movement. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very true. The Strong Towns started as a blog. It actually started as me writing about why my city was going broke. I had worked for many years as a civil engineer, as a land use planner, and my city, despite all the stuff we had done to create jobs and growth and economic development, was struggling financially. And we were laying off firefighters, we were laying off police officers, we were closing library hours, not maintaining our parks. Why was this? And I think there's a lot of explanations we give ourselves short term about budgets and what have you. But the reality is that the way we have built our city is created for us more long-term expenses and liabilities than it's actually created in wealth and prosperity. And so I started to write about that, and that grew into this nonprofit organization, which itself has spawned this. It's really, we focus on the US and Canada, but it's really become an international movement now. We have people who read our stuff all over the world and people who are trying to adopt a Strong Towns approach on every continent.
So let's turn to the book, because the book, it's called Strong Towns, a bottom-up revolution to rebuild American prosperity. If your local library doesn't have it, folks, ask them to buy it or get a copy yourself. Great book. But starting right at chapter 1, I turned it open to chapter 1 and I saw the title, Human Habitat. And it's like you had me at hello. because there's actually that's a very loaded title. There's an
Yeah.
implication that there is actually it's possible to have a habitat, a place in which we live that is like ordered towards our prosperity, that it's a good for us in like the full philosophical sense of good. So can you just tell us a little bit about that opening dynamite chapter about design that is just ordered towards, human happiness?
Yes. Yes. I think often we are very comfortable as humans looking at the ecology and the habitat of other species and recognizing that it serves them. We look at a beehive and we recognize that a beehive, in a sense, co-evolved or exists in harmony with the bees. Bees have a certain social structure to them. They have a certain way of living. And I think we recognize that if we went into a beehive and we said, we could optimize bee production, or we could optimize whatever variable by creating hive cul-de-sacs and hive superhighways, and we reconfigure this around a new set of ideas. I think we recognize that, we would wind up with neurotic bees. We would wind up with bees that didn't fit with that habitat. I think a lot of times we look at humans as separate. We think of ourselves as, different in almost a mechanistic way, that if we can go in and just optimize our cities, our way of living, we can put in a cul-de-sac here and a highway over here and a frontage road over here, that we can optimize for certain variables. And that's very true. We can do that. But what we give up is this harmony, this balancing of competing objectives that comes out of thousands and thousands of years of city building. I talk in the first chapter, even about simple things like the width of the street in relation to the building, and the way that the houses open up onto the street, and the social aspect of that space. We have a population now today in North America that is highly anxious, has high levels of anxiety, has high levels of depression, has reported high levels of loneliness.
Yes.
And we often try to treat these things, again, mechanistic, as in drugs or some type of, let's get you to the gym or what have you. But humans have been wired this way for thousands of years, and we found ways to deal with it. And a lot of those ways are reflected in the way we build our places.
And I think that'll resonate with a lot of the Catholic listeners of this program, because we think about a church, like actually the physical design and layout of the church matters.
Right.
Like whether it's beauty, whether it's proportionality, whether it's just design, the ratios that you talk about, the width of the street and so forth. Like we recognize that actually the physical structure and layout, if it's done well, it helps us worship well. And so in chapter 1, what I took away was actually if we build and design well, it helps us live well.
Yes.
So,
And I think if we look at like church design is a really good metaphor here, because the church design is like the pinnacle of the knowledge, the wisdom, the practices that go into building a community. The church design represents, in a sense, the perfected form of all those messy things that go on.
yes.
I also think it's important for Catholics in particular. And we didn't start off this by saying that I'm a Catholic, but I am a Catholic, and I respect, obviously the traditions of the Catholic Church. I think one of the things that we miss today is this idea of a parish. A parish, the word comes from a Greek word that means to dwell aside. And we think of a parish as this abstract thing, all the people who belong to the church and, donate money and show up for mass and what have you. But a parish in its original sense were the people who lived in communion with each other next to and near the church, within walking distance of the church. And that's a very physical thing. And there's a very physical relationship between where you abode, where your habitat is, where your place is, and its relationship to the church, and also to the broader community of Catholics that live, next to you.
And I think we forget this, that, cars have just sort of changed the way in which humans live. But at the heart of that is, maybe we could just say that proximity matters.
Yes.
To a great degree.
Yes. It's very interesting in a clinical way, and I think very tragic in the church way, when we look at, the effect of automobiles. automobiles are not bad. I think I own an automobile. I think it's great. It helps me get long distances in a fast period of time. But automobiles and the way we have, I think more importantly, built our cities around the automobiles have really changed the human habitat and made us, in a sense, wanderers in a new biophysical land,
Yeah.
one that is not only disconnected from each other and disconnected from our places, but disconnected from the church in fundamental ways.
Well,
It takes effort. Think of it this way: just Sunday mass attendance.
yeah.
If you live within 6 blocks of the church, which I'm fortunate enough to be able to do, my church is actually, I'm going to point right across the street. Like I can see it out my window right now where my office is. When I walk home, I walk right by the church and I go about 6 blocks. I live very close. Attending Sunday mass, regardless of the weather, regardless of any other circumstances, is a very easy thing to do. It's a matter of getting up and walking out my door.
Yeah.
When my wife and I lived 15 miles out of town, it was a 25-minute journey to get to church.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, well, let me say it very bluntly. That did affect our church attendance, because even if it just was weather or the kids were a little crabby or we were a little late getting up, it affected the amount of commitment you had to attend mass. Now magnify that in all the other things that go on in parish life. And all of a sudden being a full participant in the church is something that takes a tremendous amount of effort.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that effort isn't worth it or people won't do it, but boy, we create a heavy burden for ourselves when we put that much burden between us and a full participation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I before moving back to my home state of South Dakota for the job I now have 4 years ago, we lived in rural Minnesota, similar situation outside of a smaller town. And
where did you live?
So I was in Isanti County.
Yep.
So Cambridge was kind of our closest town.
Sure.
And practiced law there in Isanti County and kind of served, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 counties, between the Twin Cities and Duluth was sort of, I would small town lawyer. It was great. But one of the things that I really desired to do, just for my own like interior life, was I really wanted to just have a little time in the church praying every day in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. But the distances just like, it actually just was very difficult to do. And so when we moved here, one of the things we wanted to actually just have like the church as part of our everyday life. We bought a house literally a block away from the church and where I work now. And it actually, there's a Catholic priest who's kind of he's a blogger and a writer, Father Dwight Longnecker. And it's a made up Latin word, but he calls it relocatio. You want to change your life, relocate. And actually put what's important to you in your life at the center of your life physically. So yeah, great principles. I want to get to some of the other things that you talk about in the book because they're all just really important and powerful. One of the things you talk about is a bottom-up driven growth rather than sort of a top-down imposition, which I think will resonate with some of our prairie pioneer spirit here of this bottom-up ethic. Can you say more about this principle and why it's important and healthy?
Let's make it Catholic while
Sure.
we're at it.
Yeah.
Because I do think, it's very interesting because I think that a lot of non-Catholics look at the Catholic Church and see a top-down hierarchy.
Yes.
They see a pope, they see cardinals, they see bishops, and they see a top-down hierarchy. But the reality is that the Catholic Church is ridiculously bottom-up. It's a very bottom-up, parish-driven kind of place. The Catholic Church practices something called subsidiarity. And subsidiarity, the base principle of it is that a decision should be made at the lowest level that it can competently be made. And so what this does is it does put certain aspects of doctrine and faith in the hands of the Pope, but the Pope is not deciding who should get married and what time the mass should be, and a whole bunch of things that can be handled best at a church level, at a block level. I think when we look at this concept of a bottom-up approach, what we're really recognizing is that humans are messy, they're complex, they have different needs. Those needs change over time, and that we should empower them not only with the ability to do that, but also with, and I think Catholics will appreciate this, with the feedback from those actions. right? So if things don't work, you should experience that right away at the local level, as opposed to a decade or two or three later in some abstract and disconnected way.
Yeah.
One of the things we've done with our development pattern, by making it very top down and very kind of over mechanized, over engineered, is that problems will show up in one place and it's very hard to connect them to another place. So we have an epidemic of obesity, and it's like, oh my gosh, why do we have this epidemic of obesity? And then I remember back to, my great grandparents and the person we bought our family farm from, and the fact that the guy weighed like 120 pounds because he walked about 6 miles every day, just in the course of his, daily getting around.
Yeah.
We don't do that anymore. We drive everywhere and we have a much more sedentary life. But the disconnect between those is that connection is rarely made.
Yes. Yeah. I had guard duty this weekend up in the Twin Cities. I'm in the C-130 unit up there, and I caught
are you in the Army Guard or the Air Guard?
The Air Guard. The Air
Oh,
Guard.
I spent 9 years in the Army Guard.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm a lawyer. I'm a JAG in the Air Guard, and
nice.
Love serving, but caught a ride back home yesterday with somebody else coming to South Dakota. And so I got to visit with this colleague of mine who is originally from Europe, from Kosovo, and is now in PA school. And this came up actually, that people back home, back in Europe, she's a medical professional, so they want to ask her questions, and they just don't have the same sorts of issues: obesity, diabetes. They don't come up, and it's a diet thing, but it's also, I mean, she even made this connection. She's not a person that's read your book, but she made this connection of actually just like the physical layout of the places in which we live.
Right.
Yeah. So
depression and loneliness. And I think those are two of the biggest ones, because they just, they rot your inner being. Right.
Yeah.
If you wake up every day lonely and disconnected and without a purpose in life, it's very, very hard for you to thrive as a human.
Yeah.
Regardless of where you're at in your life cycle. And I think if we separate the theological from just the day-to-day physical practice of being a Catholic, or being, let's even make it a little bit more abstract, being part of a community.
Yeah.
Being part of a community creates, at the very least, day-to-day practices that keep you connected to others and gives your life a certain base level of meaning that you can, thrive and build off of.
Yeah. Okay. So you're an engineer, you're a city planner. We can maybe get into a little bit of some of the wonky stuff, because there's this distinction that is drawn in the book between systems. So like our city infrastructure systems on the one hand that are complex versus systems that are complicated. Can you explain what that distinction means?
Yeah. And it's a critical one. It is actually fairly easy to grasp if we think of like natural ecosystems. So we all recognize that a rainforest is a complex system.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of different flora, fauna. They all act independently of each other. They all respond to stress and opportunity within the environment. There's no coordinated plan. When we look at a rainforest, it has a pattern to it, but that pattern is emergent. It emerges from all these complex interactions.
Yeah.
If we look at a cornfield is a system that is not complex. It is merely complicated. It's one that is designed almost mechanistically to do one thing, which is to produce corn. If we give a rainforest a lot of rain or a lot of sun, it doesn't fail. It will adapt and evolve and change and morph, but it doesn't fall apart. But if we give a cornfield a lot of rain or a lot of sun in one cycle, it doesn't become soybeans. It doesn't become, potatoes. It just fails as corn.
Yeah.
And so what you see in systems that are complicated is they lack this inner ability to adapt and change and evolve. They lack this ability to have different properties emerge from those complex interactions. There are no complex interactions. It's, a cornfield is you put in the seed, you add fertilizer, you add water, you add sun, you get corn. When we look at cities historically have been complex adapted places. They've been places that emerged from lots of individual actions, individual interactions, individual decisions over time. But we have built cities today to be very mechanistic, to just be merely complicated, to lose that adaptability. And what that means, from a practical standpoint, is that we can grow our economy very quickly
Yeah.
by building more houses, building more strip malls, building more frontage roads, building more interchanges, adding a new highway lane. We see, and you can hear federal politicians talk about this. We're going to invest in infrastructure and then we get growth. We're going to invest in infrastructure and then we get jobs. And that relationship is very clear. It's very easy. But what we lose are those complex interactions, that feedback loop that is very local, very personal, very block level, that tells us this is working or this is not working.
So if I can, I'm going to try and repeat this back to you to see if
Yeah,
I understand
please.
it. So maybe something complicated would be like out on the, out on the highway, we build a frontage road and we're going to put in a Fleet Farm or a Kmart or whatever. And 15 years go by and the business fails. And it's like, it's not really for anything else. You've got all this complicated, you've got the pipes and the stuff that's like built. Then actually, when I lived in South Minneapolis going to law school, we had a Kmart down there that it failed.
I remember.
It sat empty. And it was actually blocking a major, it was. But on the other hand, one of the things we're seeing in Sioux Falls now, where I live, is sort of mixed use developments that are like, okay, apartments above and businesses below. And the businesses are kind of built out in a multi-purpose way. So it's like, okay, a couple years go by and like the cupcake shop goes under or whatever. But it's like now that infrastructure is there and somebody else can come in right away and put in a barber or a law firm or whatever. Like it's actually set up that way. Do I understand the principle the way?
Yeah, I think you understand the effect of complexity.
Okay.
Let me give you another effect, an example of an effect. We have a family who lives in a single family house, and for some reason, the finances of that family changes.
Yeah.
They don't have the income they once have. They're having difficulty paying their mortgage. They're having hard times. In the American system today, what we say is you're going to either A, lose your house, B, you're going to go pull the equity out of your house to make your payments. So you're going to go further into debt.
Yeah.
And those are really your two options.
Okay.
Or you're going to hope that your financial situation changes quickly. If we go back into the past and we look at what, cities of the past or communities of the past would have had the flexibility to do, that family with the 4-bedroom house could have taken one of those bedrooms, put an exterior door on it, maybe put a kitchenette in there and rented it out as an efficiency apartment, and use that revenue from that little bit of sacrifice of space to pay their mortgage.
Yeah.
And so now you would have had a living unit for someone at a very low end cost, and you would have had a family that could stay in their house and actually build some of their own wealth and capacity there. We've taken that off the table. We've said, because of the way we finance homes, because of the way that we build homes, because of our zoning, all these things, we say you can't do that. And so we've created this, mechanical thing, this very complicated system that we provide the pipes and the drainage and the foundation and the house and the financing and the insurance. And now you can have a single family home. But when a family varies from what that kind of idealistic, 2.5 kids and a dog and 2 cars in the suburb kind of thing, we don't have the flexibility to adapt in any way. And that makes our families really, really fragile.
We've got about 3 minutes left, Chuck. And I want to, so kind of bringing us to the end of the book, the chapter is titled An Intentional Life. In our last couple of minutes here, can you tell us what's at the heart of this chapter that ends the book?
Yeah, a lot of people told me I should have written this chapter first, and I don't think I could have. I think you have to explore through the book to get to this. But it really does get to this idea of a life of meaning. What does it mean to live a life that has meaning? And how can you choose that within the framework that we have? Right now, today, the one thing that we all have in common as Americans is that we are nudged to be consumers. In every aspect of our life, we are bombarded with advertising and opportunities to purchase things and opportunities to buy things. And kind of the glue that holds us together is that we all buy stuff. I think if you want to live a life that is different than that, you have to be very, you have to really push back on it day to day. You have to fight against it. I think cities of the past and a city of the future that I would like to live in is one that allows you to live a life that is intentionally aligned with your own values and your own systems. And the nudges that you have, the kind of yoke that you take on, would be one that would reinforce the kind of person that you would want to be, as opposed to the person that corporations want you to be, or the state wants you to be, or what have you. I would love to see us all be able to live lives with the intentions that we have to them as easily as possible.
So if people are intrigued by all this, what is like one next step that you might encourage listeners to take?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. To me, I always tell people to go take a walk.
Mm,
And if this is a Catholic podcast, so I think I can say this, start at your church
yeah.
and just walk a mile around the church
Yep.
and experience what that is like.
Yes.
And imagine what it could be like if it were just a little bit better. And I think if we can think in those terms, not a broad sweeping change, but in really starting where the Apostle Paul started, and saying, how do we build this church out of nothing, out of this, flawed landscape that we have and messy people? How do we start building something? I think if we just have that mindset, how do we take what we have now and start trying to make it a little bit better? We'll be amazed at what would happen generations from now.
Beautiful. Okay. So if people want to kind of plug in, what's the website? Where's your Twitter? How can they plug into what Strong Towns is doing?
Well, strongtowns.org is the website. Strong Towns is the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're working very, very hard to get this message out to as many people as we can. And so, yeah, come there, plug in. We've got all kinds of ways for people to get up to speed that don't involve reading the book. But if you want to read the book, that's a good place to start too.
Awesome. Chuck Marohn, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Chris. It's delightful to be here.
Well, and thank you, as always, dear listeners, for tuning in. I hope you kind of saw how this conversation maybe plugs in a little bit with Dr. Christopher Thompson, Green Thomism, and some of the themes that actually, we closed it out with that consumerism a little bit, and very much Laudato Si kind of ethic that I hope we can explore a little more in the future on this program. As always, love feedback. Love to hear from you. You can go to sdcatholicconference.org, click Contact Us. Let us know what you liked, didn't like, or any other feedback you have. Until next time, live well.